Hello, thanks for joining me. Looking forward to covering a really important topic today, and that's how to solve your biggest HR problems by focusing on one very commonly ignored area. And to do that, I'm very kindly joined by Hans Donckers from JiGSO Listen. Hans, thank you very much for joining me today.
Hi, Ben. Always a pleasure talking to you.
Brilliant. Great to have you. And for listeners, whereabouts are you based?
Based in Belgium, city of Leuven, this city.
Magnificent, beautiful part of the world. So let's dive into the big topic of how to solve your biggest HR problems by focusing on one commonly ignored area. But to start with, can I get your thoughts on what are some of the big HR issues that are facing companies, the chief HR officers, HR directors at the moment? Because there's so much happening. But what are the big picture issues that you see that companies are trying to fix right now?
Yeah, well, two very common problems and well-known problems. One is the burnout pandemic, I would say.
Yeah.
There's a huge increase in long-term absence. And the other one has to do with the Great Resignation. So very high turnover in every company, which leads to a renewed war for talent. And so keeping people happy, on board, that's a big challenge for every company. While the market is being very challenging, so every company needs talents to collaborate, to contribute to the bigger picture. But at the same time, they're struggling with just getting the people on board and getting them to collaborate.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's very hard to build a high performing culture when you've got just people walking out the door and then the people who are staying are disgruntled because there are all sorts of side issues that get attached to that, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Another of the big HR issues is diversity and inclusion. How do you see that in some of the work you're doing impacting employers?
Well, again, there's a parallel with the tension between the individual focus and the collective focus. Let's say the D of DEI on the diversity is very often an individual focus. It's about gender quota, about ethnicity, etc. And so I often say the D actually stands for the door. It's about opening the door to minority groups or to people who are underrepresented in the company. But opening the door is one thing. Involving people, accepting them, welcoming them, including them in everything you do, that's another thing. That's the inclusion practice. And also there we see that people want to feel included in their teams. They don't just want to feel included in the company because the door was already opened by the company. But then the next challenge is, okay, do I have a seat at the table? And if I'm at the table of the team meeting, am I being heard? Can I show up as my authentic self? Am I being valued for what I contribute? And so inclusion, to a very large extent, is also a characteristic of team dynamics. Is a team capable of including every single one during the formal meetings, but also in the informal meetings? So again, we should not forget that dimension when we talk about diversity and inclusion. There's the individual aspect, there's the company aspect, your quota, your diversity metrics. But what really counts in the end is if people feel that they're welcome and accepted in their teams.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I was alluding to the fact that there are many different HR problems, and we've talked about a couple of the big ones there. But the fact that there's a commonly ignored area, and for me, it's that whole component of the team, because we're focused so much on individual performance. So individual performance reviews, whether they're annual reviews or daily or weekly or quarterly pulse surveys and stuff, but it's always at the individual level or maybe the organizational level. How is that affecting some of those HR problems that we've described?
Yeah, correct. And so the problems are regarded as often as individual problems. So person X is leaving, person Y is absent. And so a lot of the efforts are on the individual employees or on the whole population of employees. Whereas, the place in the organization where people spend their time, but also where they come up with innovative ideas, where they solve these complex problems, is in the teams. And I mean, there's actually tons of research that shows that a positive team climate has a huge effect on employees' well-being, but also on the team performance, and so ultimately on the company's performance. And so I would say that the ignored aspect is the teamwork, the quality of collaboration. And if business leaders or HR leaders focus on teams, it's often a focus on the input. Who do we need in a team? Which skills do we need? Which seniority? How many people? That's the starting point, let's say. And then if we have all the right people in the team, we just hope that the outcomes will be positive. So we focus, there's a lot of focus on the input, and then subsequently there's a lot of stress on the output. Will this team perform? Will they meet their business objectives? Will people stay on board? Will they stay happy and healthy? Whereas in between that starting point and the outcomes, there's a whole dynamic going on. And to me, that's an often ignored aspect, the focus on that, the quality of collaboration. And you probably heard of the Google's Aristotle project, with the support of Amy Edmondson from Harvard Business School. They found actually that the highest performing teams are different, not in the setup, not in the composition, but in how they work together, in what they do and how they do it. Not in terms of the people in the team, but in terms of the quality of collaboration. Are people capable of asking help and giving feedback? Do they feel comfortable in addressing difficult issues, etc.? And so that's actually, it's not only the mediator between the starting point and the outcome, but it's even a predictor of the outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. I spent some time traveling around Europe and in the US doing some projects where it was a business turnaround project. We were getting all the line managers together and trying to improve processes and things like that. But I remember asking them, can you think back to a time when you were part of a high performing team, and how did that feel, and what was it? And there were some really interesting discussions about that, because we often know what a bad team looks like. I remember when I was a university student, I was doing a part-time job on a government helpline thing for employment law stuff. And I got told by my colleagues, as soon as I hit 5:15, hey, you need to leave. You're making us look bad. You know, you can't stay on. We've all seen examples like that. But in these discussions where teams are high performing, you know, everyone's sort of pushing each other and saying, you know, you can do better than that. You're not waiting for the boss to come down and say, this is good or this is bad. That's how you push ahead, I imagine. Is that a fair summary?
Fully agree on that one.
So why do you think organizations don't focus on the team level as much as they do at the individual level?
Well, the whole HR process starts with an individual focus, with the hiring of people. And so HR processes, I mean, historically tend to focus on the individual employee life cycle, and then on the leadership pipeline. But that's always about individuals. And there's this fetish about, you know, high performers, this fetish on individuals. And it's actually I mean, think about, you know, the best soccer players. But if they don't know how to communicate with each other, if they don't, you know, trust each other, if they are not willing to sacrifice their ego for the team, then nothing is going to happen. It's I mean, it's a classic metaphor, but it still holds. And maybe it also has to do with some of the power dynamics in organizations. A lot of attention and budget is spent on senior leaders, on high potentials, you name it. But in the core of the organization, it's all about teams, and there you don't have necessarily, you know, these the chosen few who receive all the attention and the budget. But that's actually where it happens. Yeah. And so there's this dynamic in organizations that tends to focus on those happy few rather than on the whole team, the whole army of teams, let's say.
Yeah, absolutely. So how do you think organizations try to solve this problem of improving either workplace culture or improving team performance to affect some of the larger HR problems that we talked about at the start?
Mm-hmm. What I see from our consulting practice is that so oftentimes there's this organization-wide effort, as you said, on culture. So we're going to have this big program, be it around values, where collaboration is one of the key values, and through tons of communication efforts, town halls, posters, you name it. They try to put collaboration on the agenda. But that's like mass marketing. And that's very much about communication and not about actual practices. That's one effort that I see. It is valuable. I mean, nowadays, almost every company is consciously thinking about the culture they need in order to realize their strategy, but it's a very vague concept and it doesn't immediately affect the quality of teamwork. The other common effort is sending all managers and leaders to trainings.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And, there they do talk about psychological safety, about leading teams, etc. But it's taking out these people from their context, and in that classroom or in the workshop room, their minds will be triggered, but the transfer from that classroom to the daily team practice is extremely difficult. And you're actually betting on one single member of the team. And you invest in this person to grow, to develop, but you forget about the system, because my conviction is that a team can also learn. We should regard a team as an entity as well. There is a possibility of team learning. A team can develop new habits. A team can evolve in terms of shared beliefs, shared assumptions. And so if you invest in team learning rather than in individual learning, the effect will be X times more powerful.
Yeah. And I suppose there are a couple of others, such as the classic is just the CEO or whomever tells the HR team, go fix it. We've got these problems of high staff turnover and these sorts of issues, burnout, etc. Go fix it. And so that, as you say, they might send them off to leadership training and things like that, or I suspect probably bring in a bunch of consultants or invest in well-being apps and things like that.
Often we focus on the negative outcomes. And then, if we talk about absence, there's tons of money and time invested in resilience workshops, in yoga sessions on the work floor, etc. But again, that's very individually focused, and that's trying to tackle the individual aspect and not the context, because one could say that it's the context that makes the individual sick, especially if we're talking about psychological well-being.
This area, it reminds me of this whole story, or it was a psychological or scientific experiment, and it's highly unethical. But I don't know, back in the 50s or 60s, where there were animals, monkeys in a laboratory or something, where there were bananas at the top of a pole or top of a pretend tree or something like that. And originally the monkeys would climb up, grab a banana when they're hungry, come back down and eat it. But then after a while, what the experiment leaders were doing was when a monkey would climb up to grab the banana, they would shoot it with water or give it a fright or something, which is, of course, terrible. But over time, the group learned you don't climb that tree because something's going to happen and it's going to be nasty and it's going to be bad for all of us. So eventually, they all learned not to do it. Then they would introduce a new monkey into the group. The new monkey would see a bunch of beautiful bananas, climb up, and it would be pulled back by the other monkeys in the group.
Yeah.
And so the group learnt together. And so when we're talking about some of the different solutions to fixing these issues that we're discussing, I suppose they're probably more around individual focused areas such as the yoga stuff or the consulting firms and things. But it's always around trying to find different ways to change individuals. So I'm curious, what does JiGSO Listen do, or how is it different in its focus on the teams aspect? So firstly, how are you different? And then secondly, what exactly does JiGSO Listen do?
Okay, well, to start with the latter, we use both data science and empirical evidence on team performance to give teams the right triggers to know what they have to learn and how they can learn, how they can develop new shared habits. And that also answers maybe your first question. JiGSO is a joint venture between a machine learning agency, a bunch of mathematicians and data scientists on the one hand, and a boutique consultancy firm on the other hand. So we combine data science with very solid experience and knowledge about how teams function, how they dysfunction, and what one can do to change that. And so in our team learning platform, we use validated surveys on different aspects of team dynamics, such as team cohesion, psychological safety, inclusion, team effectiveness. So we use those validated surveys, and then we use machine learning to actually generate tailored recommendations to teams as to what they should do, what they can do. Wow. And with those two elements, we bring them in this learning cycle of assessing the situation, understanding what's needed, moving to action, and keep that cycle going on. So the next time they take a survey or they receive recommendations, it will take into account their history. So instead of having these, let's say, flash in the pan surveys, where there's a lot of focus, the one-off things without any follow-up or follow-through, we want to bring those teams into a learning mode and a learning cycle.
So as the teams answer the surveys, the data changes or evolves, is that right?
Well, hopefully their results will change.
Yeah.
Because if we give the right recommendations, it will change. But we also take into account what they have done in the past, what has worked. So both on the team level, we can take their history of actions into account and monitor the evolution, but also on a more meta level, we can compare many different teams over many organizations and improve what we call then the recommendation engine. It's like, consider it like your Spotify account, your Netflix account. Based on your behavior, you will get other recommendations. And so based on what a team does, but also based on what we discover in the data on which actions work best in which context, the recommendation will improve over time. And so you could say it's like a very experienced consultant who has worked for many different teams in many different industries, many different companies. And in her or his head, there's this calculation going on, this assessment. Okay, what do I see? How do I compare this to other teams that I've seen before? What has worked in the past? What hasn't? And based on that diagnosis, an experienced consultant will guide the team towards their next steps, their learning challenges.
And how long does that take?
For a consultant? or for the
and
platform?
for the JiGSO Listen.
Well, that's the good thing. It's instant. I mean, as soon as you, as a sufficient number of people have filled out the survey, and we know some stuff about the context, they will get instant recommendations. But obviously, I mean, if we talk about, and let's zoom out a bit here, if we talk about the use of machine learning or artificial intelligence in an HR context, when you're dealing with people, I always say the last mile of the decision making should be human. But let's say the augmented intelligence before could or should be based on data. So eventually, in the end, it's the team members in the driving seat discussing the results and the recommendations, and ultimately accepting or rejecting it, ultimately deciding what to do.
Wow,
but they don't have to start from scratch.
Yeah. Sorry, the reason I'm laughing is because I'm thinking back to, I've run lots of employee surveys in my life, and pretty much every single time, what happens is you do the survey, you get the data in, and then you stick up some slides to the management team. And then let's say it's a management team of 10 people in the room. Mm-hmm. You'll have at least 2 people, and they're always the underperforming managers or the ones that are causing the problems. Those 2 people will every single time say, no, that was Joe in department X. He was upset that the photocopier broke down. That's why there's a bad score in that area. And then you have a half an hour discussion about the validity and blah, 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 blah. But I love the thing that you said there about, well, these decisions, yes, we've got to get to the last mile, should be human, but up until that point, things should be based on data and empirical evidence. And the fact that it's then instant, that's amazing. That's so different to the experience I've had in sort of trying to solve these HR problems through the surveying model.
Yeah. Because usually you just get, the visualization of what was put in. And you get a visualization of the different results, often already, treated or filtered by the person who's presenting it. Our platform shows the results in the most transparent way to every team member. And we have very detailed scripts and recommendations on how teams can have a good dialogue around it, on how to involve every single voice in that dialogue, and to come to a shared understanding, and then in the next step to a shared commitment on what to do.
Got it. I'm getting carried away because you've just raised two other areas, 2 amazing things. Is the fact that it comes up with instant solutions. So that cuts out that whole delay that the management team, where they're doing the debating and stuff like that, which is the bit that I always found slowed everything down. So you'd have a workforce who've given employee feedback and then they hear nothing. Right. So it's a long, slow process. Oh, yes, we'll fix that. We'll hold more meetings. We'll do this. We'll add a new app or whatever. Slows it all down. But the other bit that you never hear about, which I think is covered off in this, is the fact that not everything in a workplace cultural change project or whatever should be driven by the senior management. Like this is saying back to the team, it's up to you. You guys are in your team every day. The CEO isn't sitting there next to you all day long. How is your team going to improve? And it's giving instant improvement ideas and data for them to. I think that's brilliant because it gives the ownership back, right?
It gives ownership, but it also, gives them a direction, because most managers are more than willing to work on the team dynamics. They're more than willing to try to improve the quality of collaboration or the engagement of their people, but oftentimes they just don't know how, because it's not in their expertise. And so my experience with operational team leaders or even business leaders is that you don't have to convince them about the importance of team dynamics, of collaboration, but they just often don't know what to do. And they're very grateful if they get concrete, pragmatic, actionable recommendations, because I want to stress that as well. Oftentimes, the internal learning and development consultant or HR business partner will come with great ideas, but ideas that take a lot of time, are difficult to implement into the daily team practices. Whereas our recommendations are exactly that. They can be applied as of tomorrow, and they don't require, a 2-day offsite or a whole change of the modus operandi of the team. So it's like, the rituals and the practices in Agile.
Mm-hmm.
You should be capable of applying them, implementing them in your daily operations.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't require any additional effort on top of that, the mechanisms already in place.
Absolutely. And it makes it easier, and it helps embed it better, but also it's the fact that it is that daily, just almost part of your normal daily life at work, as opposed to the every 3-6 months, let's do a big HR change management project event. That is cool. It gets you a big buzz and excitement for a bit, and then it drops away and everyone forgets until we do the next thing. Whereas this is day in, day out.
Think about your personal life, Ben. If you and your partner at a certain stage think, hey, we're living next to each other, we should, have more quality time together. You go on a wild long trip to the south of Africa in the summer and think, wow, that's gonna improve things. But again, that's a one-off event, and a month later you will observe yourself, repeating the same old patterns. Whereas if you succeed in installing regular habits, let's take every Thursday evening a couple of hours together with a glass of wine, or just go for a walk and see what happens. And that walk, that glass of wine doesn't have to be spectacular. But if you do it on a regular basis, then you create this opportunity for a good chat and for a good connection. Yeah. And similarly with team dynamics, what a lot of companies do is say, okay, you can go on a team event or a team building once a year. Here's a budget. And if you're high in the organization, maybe you have the budget for 2 or 3 days. If you're an operational team, you will get a budget for like a dinner once a year. But that's not going to change things, because those are one-off events. It's like the trip with your partner in the summer, and then during the year
it's like a sugar rush.
It's a sugar rush indeed. Yeah.
Yeah. So turning to the JiGSO Listen, the platform itself, wonderful, ever evolving data which people can use day in, day out. The feedback or the learning prompts, or can you tell us about those? What happens next when they get that data back? What's that next step thing that you've been describing?
So before moving to actions, obviously we want teams to have a good dialogue first, to understand the results, to do some collective sense making around it. Hey, what are we looking at here? Not to, like you said before, to find excuses like, yeah, but that was because that project, was taking all of our efforts. No. You want to guide them through an understanding of, hey, where can we improve? Where is our team dynamics going wrong today? And so our recommendation engine highlights a number of those challenges, those areas for improvement, and then very concretely describes actionable stuff that teams can do. So if there's a problem with giving and asking feedback, then teams will receive a recommendation on an actionable practice that they can implement within their team sessions, with a detailed script on, hey, how can you make it more comfortable and safe to give and ask feedback? Or what can you do? Here's a format, here's an interaction script, as we call it, on discussing mistakes, openly sharing and discussing mistakes in your team meeting, like failure rounds every week, every month in the planned team meeting. Nice. So we actually nudge them towards a topic, towards a certain way of interacting that makes it predictable and safe for people. It's like if in Agile, your daily stand-up allows you to very proactively raise issues, raise problems.
Yeah.
And if you don't do that on a daily basis, if you're in a team with software developers and you just wait a month, then a lot of things can go wrong. And so similarly with team dynamics, you need these regular habits to be installed.
Yeah, that makes sense. So when you're explaining JiGSO Listen to people, to employers who have these big HR challenges that it can help them solve by addressing the commonly ignored area, which is the team component of the organization, I'm guessing you probably get some questions about it and things like that, such as, the old chestnut of our business is different. I've heard this in my consulting life, the world over. Our business is different. Your process won't work here, or they've already tried employee surveys or other things like that. What do you answer to sort of those ones about our business is different, and then also the surveying question?
Yeah, your business might be different, but people are people. And regardless of the type of business you're in, it will always be about people feeling comfortable to share things, feeling accepted for who they are, and then being capable of giving the best version of themselves to the team. And it doesn't, that's regardless of the business you're in. What we do take into account also in the recommendations is your practical context. Not every team operates in the same way. In a production environment, even yesterday, we had a large leadership meeting with a big player in the pharmaceutical industry, and the business leader of the logistics department was sharing with his colleagues his experiences with JiGSO Listen. And his context is very peculiar in the sense that in the research departments, you have people collaborating around the table, planning their new clinical trials, whereas in the logistics department, it's a very operational blue-collar environment, and people don't sit around the meeting table all day. So, that context will also determine the type of recommendations people get. So, your business is different, but people issues are the same. It's all about, feeling included, feeling part of the team, being comfortable with speaking up, with sharing ideas. But the context might ask for some different actions. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. And so another question is around the tech integration. Is it a long, slow process of several months to get it onboarded and connected to the lists of employees and teams? How does it work?
No. We've developed this as a SaaS solution.
Okay.
And if you can start tomorrow.
Oh, really?
It operates independently from your HCM or HRIS or LMS. You can start with it instantly. So there's no connection needed. However, connection is possible. We can tap into your LMS system and maybe even use your library of trainings and scripts to plug into our library.
Wow.
So we have a number of customers who say, we have these homegrown methodologies for team interaction, and we want you to use them. Or another customer, 30,000 employees worldwide in a large cultural transformation. They have a number of practices and team rituals that they want to push to their teams. This is not our methodology, but we can map them to our different dimensions and include it in the recommendations. So it is possible.
Got it. Oh, very good. Very fast. And then the final sort of common question I hear is around the issue of that we have such a long list of HR issues and priorities? Why should we prioritize improving our teams and working on this area?
I mean, there's tons of research available that shows that if people feel included, if your team cohesion is high, if the psychological safety in your team is high, then you will see it in the business outcomes and in the people outcomes. So the business case is clear. And if you don't invest in that, I mean, your risk for absence and turnover will increase significantly. So if you really want to have an effect of your efforts, you better work on that, because that's where the difference is being made.
And also at the anecdotal level, I'm sure anyone listening to this can think, well, they've been in lots of different teams in their career, and think to the ones where the team was amazing and then the other teams where it was not so good.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that they have been pushed up to the higher level or dragged down to the lower level.
Exactly. And it's good that you mentioned, because that really proves the point. I mean, you are the same individual, but you've experienced different team dynamics. Although you are that individual, and even as a team leader, you can get a new team to lead. And I mean, you're the same person with the same leadership qualities, but the team dynamics can differ very significantly.
Yeah.
And so we should, I mean, and I've said it before, we should move our focus from the individual skills and talents to the team as a unit of thinking, and as a blocker or an accelerator for performance.
Yeah. Something a little bit different, but I know the JiGSO Listen has some really interesting resources for employers, particularly, for example, around failure reviews and inclusion processes. Can you describe a couple of those and then how people might be able to get them?
Yeah, sure. I mean, as a result of our work with tons of customers in the boutique consultancy firm, which is called Beanmachine, we've developed a whole library of very practical, actionable scripts or templates that require no additional consulting, that a team leader, a team can just download from our website or consult in the JiGSO Listen platform and start working on very concrete topics immediately. It's we call it interaction scripts, and basically it's like a very detailed how-to guide to allow a conversation on a difficult topic like failures, or to enable teams to look together to their inclusion practices or the absence of inclusion practices, not on a philosophical or high level way, but really allowing them to look at their actual reality, their day in, day out habits, etc. So, and we've learned that team leaders love it. They're not waiting for another conceptual model. They're not waiting for another inspirational keynote of an hour. What they need is an actionable guide that tells them, hey, if you want to achieve this, take these steps, and you will, you will get there.
Got it. Now, before I let you go, I just wanted to clarify. You've mentioned that there was recently a meeting with a large pharmaceutical company, but for listeners, what are the kinds of employer types that you help? Who do you help?
We help any company where teamwork and collaboration makes the difference. And so obviously there's a certain size, minimal size, let's say. We're talking about at least 200-300 people, because that already creates some complexity and creates a need for collaboration. Typically, it's also about knowledge workers needing to share ideas, reflect together, sit together, and find ways to solve complex issues. But basically, I mean, regardless of industry, regardless of location, we serve from logistics company to pharmaceuticals to banking, insurance, professional services, you name it. Any organization that struggles with collaboration, yeah, we're more than happy to help them.
Excellent. I've seen some of the feedback and reviews and things of what you guys have achieved in companies. So that's amazing. I'm curious. You're so heavily involved in helping employers improve their workplace cultures and things like that, and have had such success. I'm curious, what are your thoughts on what's coming down the line in terms of changes to HR and the world of work?
Yeah, well, all the talk about these big changes and the disruptions sometimes makes me a bit feel uncomfortable, because at the end of the day, it's still all about people, and the psychology of people hasn't changed and will not change that quickly. So rather than looking for the next big thing or the next big trend you need to be ready for, I would say let's focus on the essence of things. And regardless of all the geopolitical changes or technological changes that are coming towards us, I'd say we still need to understand how people function. We need to have some good understanding of human psychology, of social psychology, and based on that, create the right environments, get the best out of people, and make them thrive.
Yeah.
And that's no different today than it was 50 years ago or 100 years ago.
Exactly. Yeah. Very good. For people listening to this, if they want to learn more about JiGSO Listen, what should they do next?
They should come and have a coffee with me.
Ah.
Or just go to our website, which is www.jigso, that's JIGSO.com. And there they can download tons of inspirational stuff, or schedule that coffee with me or one of my colleagues.
Brilliant. Excellent. So yeah, highly recommend it. And like I said at the start, I think it's an excellent way to address some of those big ticket HR issues that will continue to annoy and distract or affect companies, and may not get solved unless you look at this core issue of the team layer of the organization. So I just love what you're doing. So yeah, well done. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.